activated here. Okay. Turn it off and then turn it on again. There it is. Boom. What's up, everybody? What's going on? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know if you were talking to us or the.
Yeah, no, I'm talking to you guys. Sorry, I was playing a riveting game of Marvel Snap. I've never played a card game before. I got a little invested, got a little lost in it, but thank you so much for coming on, guys. I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the new season of Blowback, especially because it is going to feature one of my favorite subjects, once again, 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a little light stroll through that memory, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. What's happening? You guys already know Noah. Noah's been on many times. Noah's a OG. As far as the stream goes, we used to play Fortnite many years ago when I was streaming off of my PlayStation. And also Brendan James, Deep Beige on Deep_Beige on Twitter. You guys just watched the trailer of the Blowback Season 4, Blowback Pod Season 4. That animation goes hard, by the way. Holy shit.
Hey, thank you so much, and let me shout out before I forget. Ben Clarkson did the animation. He's a wonderful artist, and we knew he had done some videos for, I think Chapo is where I had seen him do some animation, and we said we got to get in touch with this guy to kind of kick it up a notch for Season 4 with the teasers, and I just could not have been more amazed at how he took this little idea we had and made it so amazing. So that's really the hype we're seeing today is all due to Ben. So Ben Clarkson, go look him up.
Yeah, Ben Clarkson.
Hell yeah.
A Mazal Tov, a moment of silence, whatever is the appropriate way to signify respect and honor.
What, did he die after he made it? What's going on?
Yeah, he died. Worked so hard on it that he died.
God
no,
damn,
why
man.
I'm not saying no. It's a moment of silence is very respectful in my opinion. That's all.
Oh, okay. So it's a moment of silence just for the fact that he made the trailer.
Yeah, and it's so good, and we're so appreciative and whatnot.
I think people should definitely take a moment of silence in which they are silently going to our site and then typing in their information and signing up to the show. If they want to do that silently, absolutely.
That's a really good idea, because you don't have to talk while you do that.
No.
Yeah, sorry. My guests are. I have some people staying at my house, and they were writing in the chat that the door was locked when I had already unlocked it. Sorry. Okay, moment of silence. So let's talk about it. What are you guys talking about this time around? What's happening?
So basically,
who wants to go first?
You take it, Brendan.
Well, I mean, yeah, this season it's almost sort of like been lurking ever since we started the show. I think in most people's minds, the most iconic or even on the nose idea of Blowback, which that's a punchy title for our show, but we often find sometimes it's Blowback, sometimes it's not. We thought we have to finally confront this example of the straight line you can draw from the anti-Soviet jihad that America carried out in the 80s with the Saudis and the Pakistanis and Israel and the UK. The straight line you can draw from that to 9/11 itself and a lot of other things. It's really not just about 9/11. That's one event that, of course, is an inflection point. But then we look all over the world at how that policy, that sort of peanut butter and chocolate of American capitalism and Islamic fundamentalism, although they're often said to be, sworn enemies, are actually working closer together in history than a lot of people think. And we wanted to look at that. And the Afghanistan operation is kind of like, Exhibit A. So we thought, let's follow the cookie crumbs from the 80s up until 9/11 and beyond, because we just had the withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years just a couple years ago. So that made sense for us for Season 4.
The biggest L for Joe Brandon in his career, where his approval rating seemingly never recovered when the media decided fuck this guy, which, by the way, was it was the right thing to do. It was the one courageous choice that he made in his administration's history, ironically enough, which he got subsequently punished for endlessly. But yeah, this is a subject that's near and dear to me. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about it on 8/22 because in 2019, I've described this before. I don't know if you know this, Brendan, or not, but in the year 2019, on August 20th, I said some things. I had some choice words about Dan Crenshaw when he was having a conversation with Joseph Rogan on their podcast, where I said some choice words about him, specifically relating back to Brave Mujahideen, a play on words there, a double entendre on Ronald Reagan considering the Mujahideen to be brave, something that is falsely attributed to the end of Rambo 3. This movie is dedicated to the Brave Mujahideen, which I think is not even real, but whatever.
Correct.
It's like a very common meme. Also, on top of that, I said something along the lines of America deserving 9/11, which was this very concept that you guys are tackling. It was something that, something that I firmly believe as far as blowback, because of our actions, all the way from the Afghan Civil War, all the way until now, and our guys, the people that we had trained, given weapons to, and supported, coming back and turning the crosshairs on the United States of America. I'm glad that you guys are covering it. Some of the choice things I suspect you'll be looking at is what is it, like was it University of Nebraska and the Wahhabist texts, like the extremism or the textbooks that they gave to children in Pakistan and Afghanistan that taught math on, what was it like? It was like anti-USSR.
Yeah, it was like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, if you kill X many infidels, how many infidels do you have left? And we were printing that stuff. You're right. I believe from the University of Nebraska during the 80s and shipping them off to Afghanistan to really shape a jihadist culture that we were very much in favor of. And in fact, the Taliban made use of those same textbooks when they came to power, which we also approved of, because our ally Pakistan, of course, more or less created the Taliban out of the kind of social decay that was the next generation of Afghanistan following the war in the 80s. And the Taliban, the only thing they changed is they kind of scratched out faces and depictions of women, but otherwise they were perfectly happy with the books that the U.S. sent over because of all the ideological conformity there was that we seemed to somehow support. So yeah, that's in there. I mean, it's almost like, where do you begin? But I think that if people are new to the show or want a clear idea of what we're doing this season, it's like almost split into two. It's like the first half of the season is the 80s and that entire covert operation, the biggest covert operation America's ever carried out, or at least up until that point, of a proxy war. And then the second half is, what happens after that? Where do these veterans of the Afghan jihad go? And who do they attack? It's not America right away. In fact, the first warrant in Interpol for bin Laden's arrest was issued not by America, even though he had already attacked us several times or been connected with attacks. It was Gaddafi's Libya. And we scrubbed that from the public version of his arrest warrant because we didn't want to explain that bin Laden's associates had been involved with all kinds of other unsavory stuff that our allies or us might have been okay with, or even working with him on. So we follow that kind of trail into 9/11 and the occupation that America took upon itself after 2001. So it's kind of like a real saga this season.
Love that.
And we've also got a like really crazy set of interviews that get interwoven throughout the story, similar to how we've done it in past seasons, and that are also standalone bonus episodes. We can actually, Brendan has, we can pull that up at some when the time's right. But we talked to, I interviewed Cy Hirsch, and so we've got some good stuff that'll be in the season, I think. And we've also, Brendan's got a whole score that he composed that's going along with it, and that will be released as a soundtrack in September 25th. That's right.
Yeah, just a month after the release of the show, and uh, people in Sweden enough who listen to the show, they tend to like the soundtrack. We like to make people feel like it's not a lecture, but it's kind of a compelling story, almost like a radio play. And so one thing we hope people get out of our show that they may not find elsewhere is that sense of kind of motion and momentum, and the music is always helpful with that. But also, yeah, the bonus episodes, we got 10 more bonus episodes for people who sign up. Noah spoke to Cy Hirsch. We talked to these old school CBS journalists who were always trying to scream bloody murder in the 80s, that would go back to America and get told, yeah, sorry, we're not running that. And their name is Elizabeth Gould and Paul Fitzgerald. They're amazing. Spoke to Afghanistan's youngest woman MP after 2001, Malalai Joya, who did everything from covertly teaching girls and women during the Taliban regime in the 90s to running and winning office, but then getting exiled all over again because of the warlords that we worked with. She blew the whistle on them. She's a guest, and a lot of great journalists from the region as well. So it's jam packed, but you got to sign up on Friday or before Friday if you like at blowback.show, because we're pretty proud of this season. We think it's probably our best one yet.
Hell yeah. Where would you? So a lot of people are saying Reagan created 9/11. Reagan is responsible for 9/11 in the chat, and I think that they're a little bit wrong about that. I assume that you guys start the story with Carter rather than Ronald Reagan, because one thing that happened at the 20-year anniversary and the subsequent pullout of Afghanistan was I felt super vindicated. I felt super vindicated about what I had said, and because there were so many documentaries that finally came out that actually did tie America's involvement with the Mujahideen, which was an eclectic group of individuals. Not every single one of them were like Islamist fundamentalists. There was certainly infighting within the different sects as well. But overall, some of them did end up becoming the Taliban, and what a lot of people failed to recognize, in my opinion, was that it was before that the Afghan trap, as quoted by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I'm not saying his name right after all these years because it's impossible.
He doesn't deserve it. It's okay.
Yeah, but an interview in the French magazine Le Nouvel Observateur in January 1998, where Brzezinski took credit for turning Afghanistan and the Afghan Civil War into the USSR's trap, like the USSR's very own Vietnam.
Right, and it's actually it's in that like line. He later tried to say, I didn't say that. And there was actually like an academic article that made the rounds recently that tried to claim that actually, like, maybe there is some confusion about whether or not he said that.
Yeah.
But like, as other scholars and as you sort of said, like, like recent journalistic works have made clear, and are, the archives made clear, there was an active American effort run out of the NSC specifically in the White House that was conceived of to like they conceived of their late 70s onward involvement in Afghanistan as with the goal of kicking up enough shit so as to create a situation where the Soviets would come in. And while some people have said, like, the people in the CIA or people, Pakistani ISI people say, like, oh, it was never our intention to, like, that wasn't our goal. It's like, well, Brzezinski was a rung above those in those days, like in the Carter years. Like, he was the one setting the agenda, and that was what he copped to ultimately. He did actually say that.
Yeah. We look at that in the show because we try to be fair, even to folks like the top of the food chain. You don't want to say something flat out false. He claims it was a mistranslation. He can try to play that down for the rest of his life, because the thing is, he can't quite help himself. We have tape, and there are interviews and witnesses to him bragging in his private time about how he sucked the Soviets into Afghanistan. And this guy was a top dog as far as anti-communism. He was Polish. He hated, the Russian history in Poland. He really thought, not even in terms of the Cold War, honestly, but like in terms of the 19th century kind of great game methodology. And he, after 9/11, got quite embarrassed about that strategy. But
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you get mistranslated in the entire interview? Where you very clearly detail what you did, and then simultaneously even are asked directly, don't you think Islamic fundamentalism is a problem? And like your
I straight
role.
up think that the reason he got away with it was because he was like, listen, it's French standards. You know how they are. Like that
I
was
think part of it.
more or less I think how people perceived it.
I think part of it is literally because it was pre 9/11. Like he just cause so America's crosshairs weren't as aggressively turned towards Islamic terror. So they weren't the big bad guys, like the main enemies at that point. So it was more so like I ended the Cold War by by pulling the USSR into Afghanistan. Look at me, where it one of the best parts in that interview in that French magazine, in my opinion, is when they ask him straight up. I'm trying to find that quote right here. When they ask him straight up, like, don't you think that it's terrifying to beef up these like extremist people? And he goes, what are they going to do? Like something along, I'm paraphrasing, but
I mean, and it's and to be clear, it was also like, he should have known better as he was saying it, that like those words would come back to bite him in the ass, because they were already doing stuff. Like they were showing up in the Balkans, they were showing up in the Philippines. Like Al Qaeda, what we call Al Qaeda in the wake of September 11th, more or less. But like these, the quote unquote Afghan Arabs, as they were called at the time, these Islamist warriors who went to Afghanistan. And we talk about this obviously in detail on the show. Like they had kicked up a tremendous amount of shit in a whole lot of places where they weren't supposed to have, by the supposedly by the designs of the CIA by Brzezinski and others.
Wait 1 second. Sorry. Oh god damn it. My Discord is messing up. It's like this weird thing that it does where chat, like my stream can hear you guys, but I can't hear you guys. I don't know why it keeps happening. Hold on. Let me deafen and undeafen. All right, speak again.
Hello.
Okay, Hello. I can hear you now. Okay. Perfect.
All right, we're back.
Sorry.
We're back. Just put on the show if you want, and just like send like that we can mouth our mouths to the recordings.
No. Sorry about that. It's just this happens sometimes on Discord. I don't know why, and it's a weird problem because like they can hear you guys, but I can't.
Yeah.
Which usually is
you
fine.
You can say it creates Discord.
But it's all right. Maybe it's because I'm always leaking documents in my private Discord server, like classified intelligence.
I want to talk to the Discord anyway. I don't, no offense. Like I want to talk to the people. You're mediating between us and the masses. And I
want to hear what the delicious tidbits are that you guys are leaking. You know what I mean? I don't want to skip a beat.
Fair enough. But yeah, Brzezinski is a character. We have some of the most colorful characters we've ever had on the show this season. I mean, he's a really cold, mercurial, like Machiavellian guy. Then you've got Charlie Wilson, the Texas congressman who was really became the spokesperson for the Mujahideen. He was a womanizer. He was a cokehead. He got thrown in jail, almost thrown in jail so many times over cocaine. Did a hit and run. And the night he did the hit and run and almost got picked up by the D.C. police, or maybe it was Virginia, it was a jurisdictional issue. He literally got on a plane to Pakistan to get out of there and went to Pakistan, hung out with the Mujahideen. And by the time he got back, it was all kind of quashed. He's an amazing character. The Afghan warlords themselves, or the Mujahideen who become the warlords. You got guys who were ex-communists. You got guys who were like hardcore acid in the faces of girls way before Al-Qaeda was even on the scene. And then you've got kind of our favorites in the West who, we did a lot of PR for, who were in fact pretty noxious characters behind the scenes. And then of course, you've got the old reliable Bush family and their Bin Laden opposite numbers. We try to talk about that. We try to talk about how the relationship between Saudi Arabia and America was really personified by the Bush family and the Bin Laden family. And of course others, and that conditions everything from 9/11 onward, and before 9/11. So it's definitely like a rogues gallery this season as well. It was really fun to kind of paint these portraits.
Not to spoil anything too much, but I was wondering, given the lab stuff that's going on in the intro, I immediately thought of anthrax. And I was wondering, because like post 9/11, I think the anthrax mail bombings played a fairly significant role in like really drumming up this fear that like 9/11 could come to your hometown, even if your fucking hometown has like 10 people in it. I was wondering if there's any talk about the anthrax in the show.
We mentioned it in passing as kind of color, because you kind of have to kill your darlings with this stuff. We have only 10 episodes to like tackle this whole web of stuff. We mentioned it back in season 1, I think, Noah, didn't we, with like the episode with Will? Because the anthrax stuff, to the best of my memory, was like linked back to government employees, right? Or like crank government guys.
Who are all dead now, by the way.
Interesting.
They did.
So yeah,
Dr. Bruce Ivans, look it up.
Yeah, Bruce Ivans, right. So we don't like laser focus on that in the season, but it is the background to the increasing momentum of people were really more freaked out about anthrax in a way than they were about 9/11 itself, because 9/11 happened in the, as Ted Cruz would say, the kind of liberal cosmopolitan New York. But you could get hit anywhere, as you said, Hasan. You could get hit anywhere by anthrax.
Yeah,
theoretically.
Yeah, it was really odd. What happened with I mean, not that you guys, I guess you guys didn't cover it too much, but what happened in that the facility, if I recall? Because anthrax, one of those things about anthrax is that you can really trace it depending on what like strain it is, I guess, where you can really figure out, like, for example, if it's one of those facilities that one of those like research labs that, for example, the FBI takes advantage of or utilizes. It would have been a real shame if if something happened to that facility, that lab. Right? Go on.
Like,
sorry.
No. Like you said, I mean, we're not as fully well read on that for season 4 as we could be, but it was definitely basically stamped out as a public conversation after 2001. And then little tricklings have happened since. I think there was a report that was published like a decade later. But you very well may be more on the cutting edge of what's been reported on since than at least I am right now.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing that was crazy to me was the media scare. Like, that's the thing that like is like, it may, we just may never know, like, ultimately beyond the like, hey, the anthrax came from an American lab, isn't that sus? But like, what I can definitely point to with tons of evidence is like basically from when it first starts showing up in, I think it's still September 01, but like from there through December, all the stories, like, that's what we went over with Will Menaker in season 1, but it was nuts. I mean, it was like, I don't think you have to call it like a psyop or anything, because it's like, it was a great illustration of like the natural mechanics of how they glom onto, a story like that, for the exact reason you said, which is that like it can reach, like everybody from, Kansas to Arizona.
Yeah. Also, Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban during 2001, ironically enough, he slept with a gas mask in the months leading up to and during the American bombing, because he was worried that the Americans would use anthrax on him. He's apparently very, very keyed into the anthrax scare himself. So it was a sort of a poetry there.
Yeah. It's interesting because like the scientist, committing suicide and all that. But hey, we don't have to talk about all that. Anyway, okay. So going back to it, so you said there's a lot of colorful characters. Charlie Wilson's awesome. One of my favorites, I think. Charlie Wilson's War. As far as that story is told in the movie, how much is? Have you guys seen Charlie Wilson's War?
Yeah,
a while ago. Yeah.
What would you?
Yeah.
How much of that was, in your opinion, massaged to fit the narrative that he was a brave person who was like defending American interests versus what he was actually doing?
Well, the book is pretty good that it's based on. It's by a journalist named George Cryle, who is effectively the biographer of Wilson, and Gus Avrakotos, who's played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in the movie. He's the CIA manager of the Jihad, and I would never say anything against Philip Seymour Hoffman, period, and especially his performance in that movie is great.
Oh, incredible!
But I would say I haven't seen the movie in a while. Even the book does, to use your word, massage things toward this idea that as goofy or as buffoonish or as even morally and ethically compromised as Wilson and maybe the whole operation was, the Soviets were doing chemical warfare. They were, trying to get to the Persian Gulf and take over the world. I wouldn't put all those words in Kryle's mouth, but I think in the film it's like kind of set up that inherently this guy's the protagonist, and in a screenplay you got to make your protagonist most of the time in a conventional Hollywood movie, however sleazy he is or however flawed, he's got to be up against something worse. And I think the movie does take on a bunch of disproven, which we get to in the show, disproven projections of war crimes that America was doing in Vietnam a couple years earlier onto the Soviet Union. And there were a lot
It's
of
a
movies
classic.
Yeah, it's classic. In the 80s, Red Scorpion, Rambo 3, obviously, The Beast, and to a degree Red Dawn, although I have a soft spot for Red Dawn. These movies all kind of projected stuff, including chemical warfare, which we discuss on the show, was kind of a pre-Iraq version of cooking up a whole campaign about WMD that never amounted to anything. And so the Wilson's War movie is only worth watching, in my opinion, for Philip Seymour Hoffman. The book can be very valuable because he really does paint a picture of the world that Charlie Wilson existed in. But the one thing I will say is that Mike Nichols wanted to end the movie with the planes hitting the towers. And
really?
And the producers or somebody up above his head said, that's not going to fly. This comes out in Christmas or whatever, or whatever their ideological reasons. And I'll give Nichols credit. He said some stuff that was also kind of propaganda about this exaggerated Soviet portrait or caricature, but he was trying to definitely link it to the 2000s, and I guess the studios put the kibosh on it.
It was someone.
The other thing I would say is
Tom
the
Hanks.
other crazy departure from a character is the Julia Roberts lady in real life was like a psycho right winger, and in the movie she's like she's Julia Roberts. And in real life, I think she was more
Paula Deen.
What'd you say?
I said she was like Paula Deen. She was like Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was like all these glamorous ladies, but she would have parties at her place where like the heads of state from Jordan and Saudi Arabia and others would get together, the Safari Club, as they were called. They were a big part of the head honchos against the Soviets in Afghanistan. And she would have people dress up as Romans, as like themed parties, and have black kids walk around as slaves, which is like an anachronistic, ahistorical understanding of what Roman slavery obviously even was. She was probably thinking about something a little closer to home, and serve people drinks and like refill their goblets. Like it was like a Paula Deen sicko racist party circuit. And that is the party circuit.
So Charlie Wilson actually fucked her though, right? Like that's real?
Oh yeah, they had an affair. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a bizarre social scene, and we get it that there's a funny story. I don't think it's spoiling anything. There's a funny story where her name was oh god,
Joanne. Joanne something.
Joanne Herring. Joanne Herring was her name, and she and Charlie Wilson were really big fans of Pakistan's military dictator, who was also an Islamist, named General Zia. And General Zia had the go-ahead on any weapons that we wanted to send to Afghanistan, because obviously Pakistan is right across the border, and Pakistan has always used Islamic militants in its in its foreign policy as a way to manage things in Afghanistan and to ultimately get the edge over on India. Now, back during these parties where Wilson and Herring were trying to raise money for the Mujahideen, they hosted General Zia. The only problem is in respectable society, General Zia executed the president that came before him in a military coup. And that's sometimes looked at as a faux pas. And he got to this party, and probably a lot of these bimbo gentlemen and ladies at the party didn't even know about any of that. But Joan Herring got up and like banged her champagne glass and said, "Before I introduce our guest, General Zia, I just want to make it clear, he did not murder the previous president of Pakistan. And I really wish we could all just get that over with. Let's just get that out of the way." And everyone in the audience was like mortified and suddenly wondering maybe what was going on here at these fundraisers.
Yeah. I mean, that's a classic, leader in MENA region that kills former leadership is ripe for American allegiances. So at the heart of the matter, what you're basically telling me is that we are the ones who funded, facilitated, gave infrastructural, logistical support to these fundamentalist groups that we turned into massive powers in the region that we were utilizing to our benefit until it ultimately created an unstable environment where they actually did assume control over Afghanistan twice now. I would say in both circumstances it was our doing, and then we just kind of cast them aside because that's what happened in the aftermath of America pulling out of Afghanistan as well. One thing that I guess I want to talk about with respect to the Afghan pullout is that Donald Trump lucked out dramatically. I want to hear what your guys' opinion is on this, where, like, do you think Trump would have actually pulled out of Afghanistan? Because I feel like he had the opportunity to do so in his first term, and he never really followed through on it, even though he did negotiate the terms of leaving.
Yeah, he was the one who he set the table for Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did negotiate the terms, and to be fair to him, that was something that Obama had refused to put himself out there to do. The Trump, according to Hasan Habas, he's a professor at the National Defense University. So technically he works for the DOD, and he told us that during the 90s, we were letting in all kinds of Al-Qaeda guys intentionally. So, he was a very good and knowledgeable guy that we speak to on the show. He wrote a book recently called The Return of the Taliban, basically trying to cover everything that's happened since 2021. And he covers those negotiations. And apparently Trump gave everyone a 8 to 9 month deadline and was literally saying, almost like as a parody of himself, in the halls of the White House, "Where's my deal? I want my deal. Where's my deal with the Taliban?" And he got it. He did achieve that. He wanted to apparently pull out the troops before 2020 so he could use it as an election talking point. Maybe it's good for him that he didn't end up having the time to do that.
And he lost, yeah. So
lost
now
anyway.
So now he has the perfect talking point to be like, I would have pulled out perfectly. Whereas I mean, in a different timeline, I guess we would have seen Rachel Maddow get extra crazy. You know what I mean? As far as like criticizing pulling out of Afghanistan, because I feel like liberal media would have ate Donald Trump up even further.
Well, you know what? Funny thing you mentioned Rachel Maddow. I don't take the time to put this into the show because ultimately she's kind of irrelevant now anyway. But there was that huge story that I remember seeing her really take the lead on about how Russia was paying bounties for American soldiers. A couple years ago. And that ended up being nonsense. But funnily enough, that is, again, talk about projection. We literally did that in the 1980s. Gustav Rakotos, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in that film, they used belt buckles as proof of, an American kill. And we obviously paid the Mujahideen who killed and, by the way, used sexual violence as a weapon of war in a way that maybe the Contras in Nicaragua is the only other like modern example of using it that brutally. These guys were like the Contras, the guys we were backing. You're right to point out that there was a broader resistance to the Soviet invasion, which the Soviets knew, and they were actually quite reluctant to do this in the first place.
Yeah.
But the ones we bought and the guys that we liked the most and the guys that we gave billions to collectively, and in the case of one really bad guy, $1 billion straight out went straight to him. They were the mafia bosses. They were not the moderates or the middle of the roads. We made sure that it was not a liberal nationalist opposition. And so just on that bounty hunter thing, we were literally paying guys to, as the CIA put it, cornhole Russian prisoners and then kill them and use their belt buckles or maybe even literally their scalps as proof. Something that Russia actually did not end up doing when Rachel Maddow was crying bloody murder a couple years ago.
We famously cover this on this broadcast, at least on one of the latest Call of Duties, where the Highway of Death, a war crime that the former Bush administration engaged in the attributed that specific act of war crimes to Russia in one of the latest Call of Duty games, where they were like, who could do such an awful thing? And they were like, of course it would be Russia. Who would ever bomb an entire highway full of retreating soldiers that had given up and also their family members? Who would do such a thing?
And also, like we just said, I mean, as far as projection, the Vietnam War happened only 5 years before we booted up the Mujahideen. Actually, we talk about it in the show, the Vietnam War was still in progress when we actually first made contact with a lot of these Mujahideen. Zbigniew Brzezinski kicked it up a notch to make it like a real machine, but we were already working with Pakistan in a lot of ways, something that was well known.
And besides, if the Vietnam War was ending and the Golden Triangle was coming to an end, there would have to be a new place to grow all the world's illegal heroin.
Well, that is interesting, isn't it? Is that we had the Golden Triangle throughout our wars in Southeast Asia. We wind that down in like 75. And then, wouldn't you know it, 5 years later, Afghanistan is on its way to becoming the heroin capital of the world, and still is.
Yeah, but not for America though. That European heroin, right?
It's the European market.
Yeah,
but it's
interesting.
But it still produces 90% of the world's heroin in general.
Because America is like fentanyl, which is more cheaply made and comes in from Mexico and China or wherever. Like is the thing here.
Yeah. I always found it to be interesting that like somehow it's not like our heroin comes from somewhere else, our fentanyl comes from somewhere else, whereas like the entire market for the rest of the world, all that heroin is being produced. All that heroin is being produced in Afghanistan. I guess like as far as JSOC operations goes, they have a line that they don't cross, which is like don't send that good Afghanistan heroin to the United States of America. Send it elsewhere.
Well, it would certainly complicate because a lot of Western officials got rich off of enabling the heroin trade. Obviously, we talk about in the latter half of the season about the major centers of production of heroin in Afghanistan were under U.S. control, and the major heroin dealers in Afghanistan were our friends in the government and what was formerly the Northern Alliance, the anti-Taliban alliance. It's not to say anything nice about the Taliban, but sheer mathematics make it so that they could not have been producing the majority of the heroin. And that just means that a lot of people were enabling that. And if you want to pull that off, you probably want to minimize as much as possible where the product ends up being connected to the occupation that your country is carrying out.
There's another important player here is Pakistan in terms of also what the drug trade is capable of there, because the Iranian border Iran has a huge heroin problem, a huge addiction problem, and Pakistan does as well. And both of their governments do a very good job of keeping lids on it, or at least trying to. To the extent that like Pakistan is, particularly now that there is no American occupation and the Taliban is trying, it appears, and the reports that we have now, the limited information that we have from the UN and other authorities suggest that they are in fact, like reducing. Yeah, you've clearly discussed you've played the hits here.
The Taliban's
Looking
successful opium ban is bad for Afghans and the world,
Yeah, he's
according
putting this up
to
on
the United
screen,
States
Brennan.
Institute of Peace. The ban is not a counter-narcotics victory and will have negative economic and humanitarian consequences, potentially leading to a refugee crisis.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, I'm sure you've covered this many a time, Hasan, but we were in some interview the other day. It was a good one where both I thought to put it like the war on terror and the war on drugs. You know, both of them do not target drugs and terror per se. What they are for, if you look at the results, is to control market share of those things. And we don't go after anyone who deals drugs per se. The guys
we hire them.
We hire them. The guys who further our interests, and I mean, we could talk about all over the world. I'll limit it to Afghanistan so I don't go off book. But like in Afghanistan, it was the guys we worked with because it made money. It was an illicit but very useful revenue stream. We talk about BCCI, which I'm sure you've spoken about before. That was it was really one of the primary, if not the primary, illicit revenue streams toward the Mujahideen and the Contras. But we don't go after anyone who deals drugs. We go after our enemies who deal drugs. And with the war on terror, we didn't arrest anyone who did terror or go after anyone who did terror, only those who were opposing either the occupation of whatever country we were in or those who were fighting the other terrorists that we like. So, of course, you can see this in Syria, where we worked with the al-Nusra Front and other associated al-Qaeda groups because they were on our team.
Continue to work with, if not the same ones, like their immediate descendants.
Exactly, because and it's not even like it's the Contras where we called them freedom fighters.
It's interesting you say that because not to toot my own horn again, but of course to toot my own horn again. That is precisely what I was talking about with respect to Dan Crenshaw, who at the time, while he was talking about like, why did 9/11 happen? Oh, it's because they hate us because they ain't us. That was his like sound foreign policy analysis on the subject matter. Simultaneously, he was in Congress blocking a veto, vetoing not vetoing, but blocking a bill that Bernie Sanders, I believe, had put forward that would stop arming Al-Qaeda by way of Saudi Arabia, this time in Yemen, of course, where our arms was by way of Saudi Arabia directly getting into the hands of Al-Qaeda, which he thought was bullshit. And, Bernie Sanders thought it was bullshit, but Dan Crenshaw and numerous others, of course, thought, no, it's fine. We should give Al-Qaeda some weapons. Like, what are you talking about? They need it. They're neurodivergent minors.
We've sort of run with an aesthetic this season because we're both big fans of Metal Gear Solid. Obviously, Phantom Pain takes place in Afghanistan.
Brendan, you should just share your screen and pull that up.
What's that?
You should pull those the episode titles up.
Oh yeah, I will in a second. But yeah, so we've run with this Metal Gear theme, and it's funny you mentioned Crenshaw because if there is to be a real world example, I cannot imagine a shittier eye patch guy than Dan Crenshaw to stand in for Big Boss or Naked Snake. But I guess he's who we have. It's funny that you got in trouble for saying
he's bigger boss.
Yeah, he's puffy boss. He's too big boss. But yeah, I mean, the episode titles. I could probably rattle them off off the top of my head. I think we don't do it for every single one of them, but episode 1 is called Snake Eater. Episode 2 is called Bleeders and Dealers. Episode 3 is The Trap. Episode 4 is They're Yours Now. Episode 5 is called We Can Live With That. And then for the rest of the season, episode 6 is Ground Zeroes. Episode 7 is Guns of the Patriot. Episode 8 is Sons of Liberty. Episode 9 is Peace Walker. That's the Obama episode. And episode 10 is, with the withdrawal, The Phantom Pain. So, and the last thing or not, maybe not the last, but like the one thing I wanted to say about the withdrawal and picking them up and putting them back down, to your point, Hasan, is what I'm interested in seeing, we need to now sit back and watch, is back in the 90s, America was totally fine doing business with the Taliban. We made noises about their treatment of women, et cetera, but we had a whole pipeline deal lined up that Osama bin Laden screwed up because he was attacking the USS Cole and the embassies in Africa. But what I want to see now is whether or not there can be dealings again, maybe even in 20 years, who knows where it could go, between the U.S. and the Taliban, because U.S. officials visited this month and had quote unquote, like normal or whatever, constructive conversations. And the Taliban and Iran are beefing on the western border of Afghanistan over water rights. The Taliban doesn't like Iran. It doesn't like other, Shia groups in the region. And even though we've been fighting a war with them for the past 20 years because of Osama, essentially, it's not out of the question to imagine us finally being able to work with them, even if it's kind of under the table. And I'm curious to see more evidence of that as time goes on.
I wonder if that will lead. I wonder if that will lead to.
It's Afghanistan's also really useful for us. If not, even if we don't have bases there anymore, that like region is incredibly it's incredibly